Thanks to all of you, and I have a deja vu. It seems like we just did this last night. So. Well, I think my purpose this evening is to reiterate to those of you who were there last night who we are, what we do, what assisted living is, and what our intent is here for this evening. But Aegis is a company based in Redmond. We've been in business for 13 years. We have 35 operating senior housing communities. Of those, 12 are in Seattle. Soon the 13th, we hope. We're privately held, basically family held, more than anything else. We're a numerous award winner of many awards. One is the one we're most proud of is one of the best places to work in Washington by CEO Magazine. We were winners 2002 to 2006. So we think we're a good employer. We specialize in assisted living and memory care, and this operation will be that. And what is assisted living? Assisted living, just briefly, those of you who have not had occasion to have a loved one in an assisted living community, is really a combination of a hotel operation, an apartment operation, and a very light quasi-clinical environment at the same time. So it's three legs of a stool, if you will. We are all private pay. We have customers who are typically frail elderly. Average age of our residents is about 85. About 80% of them, 79 to 80%, are female. Most of those folks don't need complex medical interventions, but they do need what we call ADL assistance. That's activities of daily living, grooming, dressing, bathing, medication management. They don't need complex invasive medical assistance. They're not ill, but they're people who need assistance because they can no longer maintain their independence. We're not a nursing home, but we are licensed by the Department of Health in the state of Washington. Our model is a residential model. It's not clinical. It's not an institutional model. And our operations, as you can imagine, with such a frail population, and about a third of the apartments, we think a quarter to a third, will be for people with memory care impairment, which means we have a very intense operational programming model that we operate. So that's pretty much what we do and where we are, and I think, I don't want to burn Matt's time, but that's the most important part of what he's going to talk about.
That's perfect.
Okay, thanks very much.
Jerry.
Okay.
A lot of projects that have been going up lately in the neighborhood and all over the city are multifamily. And just to differentiate this kind of project from multifamily, assisted living is a permanent, ongoing facility that Aegis will operate, maintain, and their function in the community is a long-term commitment. And so I just want to let people know that often you see the multifamilies, condominiums that are often sold and spun off, and there's different ownership. But I think what you find with this group is that there's more of accountability about how they're going to the community maintained. So another preamble before we get into more detail is another differentiator for assisted living is we are dealing with frail residents, and programmatically big determinant is having a safe and secure place to drop them off where it's out of the weather, and often in a more suburban location that would be a portico Chevy driveway. In all our examples tonight we're going to show that as something under the building. It's safe, secure, and it has to be around the back in our circumstance, but we do not want to forget that we need a front door. So we have kind of two front doors that are easily controlled and maintained in these projects. Another key programmatic issue is that our ground floor is very activated. Even though it's a residential project, the whole ground floor is activated during the day with 3 meals a day. Everyone comes down to the dining room. There's a wonderful bistro that will be part of this project where you can get coffee or like a soda fountain kind of effect. There also will be wellness classes and a small theater for gathering as well. So, and there will be a small commercial component, so this can be considered mixed uses as part of the project. So that's a big part of the scheme on the first floor. The third issue is memory care, as Jerry mentioned. Very special. Our second floor will have a floor dedicated to those with Alzheimer's and memory cognitive issues, where they need to be contained in a specific floor and they're not allowed to leave unescorted. So a result of that is our second floor has to have a big terrace where the sun can shine and they can go outside on their own and be able to get some fresh air and a little bit of exercise. So those three things are very different than you find in a multifamily project. So moving right through the site, as we all know where it is, and Madison is at the crossroads of three very distinct communities, and it's had a huge history of diversity, and a streetcar used to run down it, and it's always been at a crossroads. And as pointed out by Andrew, the fellow of the neighborhood we met with last night, among several other people here, pointed out that it's also a gateway opportunity coming up and down Madison where the grade changes and everything. So it's a neat opportunity on that level as well. The site is well served by transit. Those different bus lines, there are 5 different bus lines that go every direction at this location, and look how many places it stops. There's probably 6 bus stops. So it's well served by transit, and we expect a lot of our visitors and 75 staff members that this facility will employ to be able to have a lot of options in getting here, as well as living in a very dense neighborhood that has lots of walkable choices as well. So the zoning is NC, which stands for neighborhood commercial, and it's designated as a pedestrian street. That's what that blue hatch is down Madison, and it's 65 feet tall. That's the height of it. It's surrounded by an L3 zone, which is a new designation as of just this month. That has a 40-foot height limit. Part of our site is right here in that other zone, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, the blue area represents our site. It's a challenging site because it's a triangle, and it's a very sharp corner here and here. And the other challenging part of it is very flat, and all of a sudden it drops off about 15 feet in this most eastern corner. And we're going to talk about these 3 trees right in the center of the project next. Before I do that, let's just look at the photographs. This is the project site. You recognize the street trees, which are a nice red color at this point of fall. And right across the street is the Safeway project with multifamily housing on top. And there's also a church right across the street and residential multifamily across 22nd Avenue. So some of the more significant landmarks and newer buildings in the neighborhood, I'm sure you're all familiar with these. The Madison Temple Church is right across the street as well. So the envelope that we can build to is something that's required of our presentation, and that's this thing that looks like a piece of Jell-O. And that's how high and big and bold we can build within the setbacks and the height limits and the constraints of the land use and zoning code. But what we're going to eventually get to, and this is our preferred alternative, is something that's much more reductive of that and speaks to many issues that we'll get to in a few minutes. Also on this chart is the design guidelines as part of this program. These are the ones we picked out that we think are specifically related to the project. I'll highlight this one, corner lots. Because we have a very sharp corner here, it's a unique opportunity to highlight that corner as possibly as a beacon or some kind of a gateway in what would be like a flat iron type of site. So our development area is about 25,000 when you back out the setbacks and whatnot. But our key issue tonight is focusing on the preservation of the trees or the removal. And these large trees have been declared as exceptional trees by the city arborist, which means we have to go through a process to see if we can remove them. In tonight's process, the first step, DPD has asked the Design Review Board to chime in on the viability whether these should be removed or not. So we're making our case tonight, and quite clearly, we can't develop this site without removing those trees. So let me just explain why. The development area gets limited down to 15,000 square feet, which is a 40% reduction in the development site. These trees are in decline. They're 60 years old, and they only have a lifespan of 80 years. We have an arborist on our team and a landscape architect that's confirmed that. She's also told us that the tree roots, which are substantial on these are English elms, their root structure can actually extend much further than the drip line at the edge of the tree. So even developing within this footprint that we've defined could jeopardize the trees, and there's no guarantee that they'll stay. So in good faith, we have our first option. We have tried to save these trees. And we went through a process to see how that could be done. The key component to that was access right down here at Madison to our lower level parking garage. So this area could be preserved and untouched. The first problem we came across, and we just found this out recently, was SDOT, the Department of Transportation in Seattle, will not allow us to put that curb cut so close to the intersection of 23rd and Madison. It's too close to the sidewalk, it's a stacking distance problem, and it's a safety problem, and it's not essentially acceptable. So we've had to abandon that idea and go back to providing a ramp that drops 15 feet inside the building to our low-level parking garage here. So this little diagram here shows us what our garage initially looked like. And then by having to do a ramp down there, we've lost almost half of our parking. So effectively, that reduces how much we can develop on the site, how many units of assisted living we can do. And ultimately, that's turned out being a 40% reduction in our development capacity. The other downside of saving the trees is also our loading berths, which are the loading dock areas for the facility, have to be out on the street because we have nowhere else to put it, as well as an accessible van parking stall. And probably the worst condition is that covered porte cochere drop-off area I talked about, is we have to put it out on this corner. And it compromises probably the best opportunity for placemaking and architecture on the site. And it's kind of a shame to ruin that opportunity by putting a drive-through in there that's covered to drop everybody off. So in 3 dimensions, this scheme would look something like this with a drive-through right there on that corner. And excuse me, and the unsafe garage entrance down at the lower end of the site was down there, which no one wants us to do. So that doesn't work for us. We've lost a lot of development capacity, but we studied another option, our second scheme. This one starts off with a strong second floor that is in a V shape, and that helps us get enough units to meet our programmatic needs. But at the same time, it also creates kind of an odd shape in the back of the building. And also, we'll show you our preferred scheme here in a second. The main floor amenity areas and the amount of commercial